having just figuratively walked through hell, I realized that most MSPs are unprepared for something like this. Even in 2021, we were still, I think, as an industry, thinking that security was antivirus and firewall. I don't think many of us were really thinking that it was going to happen to us. And now here I was, one of them saying, it happened to me, and it happened to me in a really bad way. I feel that we're under attack. We have enemies at our gates that are trying to get in, that are looking to destroy us simply because of the ideals that that thing represents.
Welcome back to this episode of MSP Insider, and I am so excited for this one for many reasons. I get the blessing and the gift to interview here Robert today. Robert, why don't you tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it?
Oh boy. Well, that last part is going to probably take some explaining, but thank you for having me, Jeff. Let me start right there. I'm Robert Cioffi. For those that don't know me, I'm the CTO, which is maybe a topic that we'll get on about chief titles. But I am the CTO and co-founder of an MSP called Progressive Computing, which is based in Yonkers, New York, just north, lost in the shadow of Manhattan, New York City, right? So we're just in the suburbs there, but you know, our reach extends down there and even out wider. We've been doing this 32 years as of February 2025. So why do I do what I do? Wow. So, you know, I grew up as a technical person, just really loved tech, loved helping people, non-technical people, use technology to their advantage, whether it was in their business or personally. You know, I went to school for computer science, and I always had an entrepreneurial calling. So there you go. Those are the two main ingredients of starting an MSP, long before MSPs were even a thing. So, but that's predominantly, you know, I just love taking people down that path of having those aha moments of, oh, okay, I get it now, right?
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in this conversation to really dig into 32 years and, you know, why you still choose to do what you're doing. And so we'll unpack that a bit as we get further in as well.
Yeah, happy to.
When we start off this show, one of the kind of the gems we're getting known for is attempting to ruin the guest's day a little bit by dropping a question on them at the beginning from
way
a
to make
prior
me
guest.
feel at home, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. But the good news is you're going to get the opportunity to do this to the next guest when at the end of the episode too.
Okay.
The good news also is that you actually know pretty well the guest that this question came from. So I recently interviewed Matt Lee, and he blew my mind in a bunch of different ways, but he's the lucky guest that left the question behind.
I can tell already I'm going to probably stammer on this one, but go.
Yeah. All right. So Matt Lee wants to know, Robert, what in your organization do you suck at? You know you suck at it, and you've actively chosen not to deal with it.
Me personally or our organization?
Either or. However you want to deflect it is fine.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the personal angle on that. I've never really been good at the HR side of things, right? I think I get along with people well enough. I think I've got good interpersonal communication skills, but I always just despised anything related to HR, dealing with people. You know, just from the mundane of the time off to the annual or quarterly reviews, check-ins. If you follow the, some of the personality traits, I'm a lion, right? I'm all about like, let's get down to business, right? We got problems to solve. We got things to do. I don't want to wipe noses and dry tears. It's not my thing. So thankfully, I have a business partner that is way more in tune to that stuff than I. Not that he does it directly, but that we've also built a team of people who culturally and even process-wise do a way better job at that stuff than I can.
Yeah, no, that's fair. What about, because you've been doing this so long and because you have so much experience, think maybe through the lens of what is the one thing you knew, whether it's you or the organization, sucked at and knew you sucked at it, but you chose to act on it. And what was that thing and how did you solve it?
Well, I think there was something that came to light, and I don't remember exactly when it was. And, over a 32-year arc, you would think that we would have learned or observed this or become aware of this problem sooner. But
Yeah.
it was somewhere around the 10-year ago mark where we realized that we sucked at project management.
Mm,
Project management for us, especially when we were smaller and leaner, and it was in the early days of this 32-year arc. Project management was, scribble some notes down on a piece of paper, or I know what to do up here. And then as we began to grow and scale and add more people and things
mhm.
got more complicated, we were just really awful at project management. And even today, I don't want to make it sound like we're a bad organization. We're not, but
Yeah.
we've come to realize that we're not. This is not our um, comfort zone, or I should say, we're not skilled or educated on this, and we've put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we have the right tools and we understand the process well enough, and that we, describe scopes of work
Mm,
better, and that we have enough people aligned to the right tools so that we can implement projects properly. you know,
yeah.
pro- Implementing projects sounds easy, but it's incredibly complicated,
Yeah.
especially when you add the human element of there of
Mm,
communication and
right. Yep.
documentation and
Hmm.
setting expectations and negotiating timelines with people, users, right? We're all people pleasers in this
Hmm.
business, right? Users upset, the owner's upset, they want something done a certain way, but that's going to torpedo the
Yeah.
process or the project. You can't just say yes. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of little things like that we've had to learn over
Yeah.
the years. And I want to, I don't know what grade I'd give us. I'd probably give us maybe like a B minus right now.
Hmm.
And that we're striving for that B plus at the moment.
Yeah. No, that's great. I also like that you really leaned into communication as an element, especially in the project space. I think one example that I oftentimes saw in my world was like one, communication was the first thing to get dropped or
Yeah.
misrepresented, right? So as the project person, I'm thinking like I've got this task of things to get done, and that might be flip the switch to deploy the new thing. And as a result, like my worldview kind of stops at flipping the switch to deploy the thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't go all the way down to, well, what about the end user who doesn't know how to log into their computer now because MFA is connected and
Right. We've
no
changed
one's there,
something,
right?
right?
Yeah.
We've done something to adversely affect their
Yeah.
workflow.
Right. And so to get out in front of communication and expectations, you hit both of them is like,
Yeah.
that's just the absolute gold, right? That's ultimately kind of the currency that we deal with in this
Yeah.
business, in the
Well,
service
damn it. Don't
business.
you know that I'm working hard over the weekend and at night
Yeah.
getting this thing done right for you? Right. Like
Right.
they don't see that. Right. And
Yeah.
so you've got to be, you got to put yourself in their shoes and see
Hmm.
things from their angle.
Yeah. Because if you really come, oftentimes we'll use internally the adage of you got to get shoulder to shoulder instead of spear to spear, right? And
Hmm.
the concept
I like that.
being you gotta come alongside your client and even to your point, like, damn it, I've been working on this all weekend, all night, whatever. Like that might be the reality, but it's also kind of the reality of the job. But there is a way to come across the table literally and sit down with the client and preface even that with communication. Now, like,
Totally.
here's what's going to go into the change on Monday morning, right? My team or the team is going to be doing XYZ between now and then. Can I line up some resources on Sunday that can do the testing before Monday comes? And like, again, it's all communication and expectations and management, but it's the discretionary effort, I think, that, costs people even the B ratings. It's more like a D minus, I think, as an industry standard when it comes to that specific area of the business. So
Agreed.
yeah,
Totally
interesting
agreed.
there.
I like the way you put that, especially the spear to spear, versus
Hmm.
shoulder to shoulder. I'm totally stealing that. So
Yeah, yeah, it's
I hope you
been
haven't copyrighted it because
no, I
I'm using
haven't.
it.
Yeah, do it. Absolutely. And because it's so visual and so simple to remember. I use it all the time. We talk about it internally a lot. And
Mhm.
so feel free to scream it loud and proud from the
Oh, I will.
stages. Yeah. Um, let's pivot a little bit, right? So you've been incredibly open about Progressive's ransomware experience. And now you're actually working with, I saw earlier, last month, maybe probably, or this month, it's still January, it
It is.
counts,
Yep.
that you're now working with Jason Slagle and Matt Lee on Cyber Rise.
Right.
What made you decide to step into that leadership role in cybersecurity education?
Well, I mean, how does one turn down the opportunity to work with those two guys?
Yeah. It's fair.
I'm going to try to get them though to, maybe get a little bit more closer shaved than having those long beards.
Yeah.
If I had one like that, I guess we would be ZZ Top.
Hmm.
For those of you old enough to remember
Yeah.
such bands, not
Right.
that I am that old.
Yeah.
No, but so this all started. If I can go backwards in time and get
Hmm.
a lot more serious here, when after we suffered that mass scale ransomware attacks, for those that don't know, we were one of the Kaseya VSA victims of July 2021. Threat actor broke into our VSA server, installed Revel-Sode no Kibi on about 2,500 endpoints, 250 servers. It was not a good and a fun experience, right?
Hmm.
And out of that, um, we we received so much community help, right? The community help, the friends that we had made in our industry, the network connections that we had made, both locally but mostly from across the entire MSP ecosystem. And specifically, I'd like to credit IT Nation Evolve, where we've been a member of for a very, very long time, and
Hmm.
made such wonderful friends there. We got so much help that is what enabled us to recover from the event. So let's fast forward a little bit. Now it's like August of that year, and I was taking stock of all my blessings,
Hmm.
having just figuratively walked through hell.
Yeah.
And I realized that most MSPs are A, unprepared for something like this, and B, should they go through it. And I don't think there's anything special about us other than the fact that we elected so many years ago to invest so much time in building relationships
Hmm.
across the industry. um, does all the other 40,000 MSPs, or however many of
Sure.
of us are out there, have they all made the same investment? And the conclusion that I drew is that even if it were a small percentage that have not,
Hmm.
let's say it's only 10%, and I think the number is far, far, far larger than that, that represents a massive amount of MSPs who are vulnerable to going out of business or having much greater liability than they they could withstand, if taking on a threat like that by themselves.
Hmm.
So this idea of msp911.org um, um, uh, was birthed in my mind. I registered that domain name, by the way. I realized that that domain name doesn't necessarily work for international.
Yeah.
For instance, in Italy, emergency is 118, not 911.
Hmm.
So at least here in the United States, I think
Yeah.
everybody gets what MSP 911 means. And it was
Right.
essentially just this idea of how does the community respond to an MSP who's like hyperventilating because they don't know what to
Hmm.
do. They just got hit. They need some help. They're
Yeah.
looking just for some guidance or maybe a friendly voice, right? And so fast forward, we hitched that wagon, that idea, to CompTIA. CompTIA helped us form something called the Emergency Response Team, which we ran for about 2 years, where we assisted some callers with live events.
Hmm.
But what happened is sometime last year, um, we ran into some, I'll say, legal limitations and insurance limitations with what we could do under the umbrella of CompTIA.
Right.
And with their assistance, we've spun out what we're calling CyberRise, so cyberrise.org. You can go to that website, www.cyberrise.org. There's two R's in there, CyberRise.
Hmm.
And you'll see that the MSP 911 project is one of our three tenants, but we're expanding our scope to include education for MSPs in prevention, as well as an educational component, right?
Yeah.
Lifting up future leaders in this industry. So I know that was a long mouthful there, but it was kind of really important to understand where this idea germinated from and how we
Right.
landed together.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the context too, because it really helps pull together this next thing that I was sitting here thinking about in preparation for a conversation, right? You you have been vocal and you went through one of the things that most MSPs can't say they ever had to endure with that ransomware attack.
Yeah.
And so you've sort of gone from this like from crisis to keynote is kind of like the way it's happening in my head, right? You're emceeing at Right of Boom in
Yes.
2025, just
Yep.
next month.
Yep.
And if we would have told you the day after the ransomware attack had happened, like that you would be the MC of Right a Boom, like what would you have said to that back then?
Yeah, it wasn't really what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't thinking about, how I would turn, all these lemons into lemonade. I know that's a really,
Yeah.
excuse the pun here, watered down
Mm.
cliche, but truly, I was looking at, how do I survive this? How do
Mm-hmm.
I regain reputation? How do I maintain relationships with some customers, which we lost, by the way. There
Yeah.
was one in particular that hurt very bad. It was one of our largest accounts that we
Mm-hmm.
had for about 12 years. They essentially just said yes to everything that we ever did, or,
Yeah.
or told them to do. They just approved it.
Mm-hmm.
There was very little resistance from them.
Yeah.
But some of those accounts slip away. Some of those years of relationships just dissolve. I
Yeah.
was looking at survival at that point. I wasn't really
Mm.
thinking about um, where this might go, or how I could turn this into something else. And it shocked me, Jeff, because during that summer, I went to an Evolve peer group
Mm-hmm.
meeting where I'm the facilitator of two different groups, and both groups wanted to know what they wanted to hear the story, right?
Yeah.
We burned 2 or 3 hours in both groups, just talking about my story. I kept telling them, guys, this is your meeting, it's not mine. They're like,
Yeah.
we don't care about our meeting, we want to hear what
Mm-hmm.
happened. And I think it was in that moment that I started to realize, yeah, I think I could do some good in this world by
Yeah.
sharing our experience to help better prepare others, or get them motivated to take some better action, invest in conferences, let's say like a Right of
Yeah.
Boom or any other security conference. Take this stuff seriously,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think it's even in 2021, we were still, I think, as an industry, thinking that security was antivirus and firewall, right?
Yeah.
All right, maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
exaggerating a little bit, but I don't think many of us were really thinking that it was going to happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
And now here I was, one of them, saying
Right.
it happened to me, and it happened to me in a really bad way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it's such a wild thing to even try to transplant myself into for that very reason, right? I was up until 8 months ago, I was in MSP as an MSP for 18 years, 5 different ones across the time. And I remember the evolution of the mindset, so to speak,
Hmm.
uh, and the evolution of, to your point, like almost how much risk were you willing to willingly or knowingly accept, because it was gambling, but there hadn't been things like publicly as known as like those events when
Yeah.
Kaseya was hit. And so there was sort of that air of confidence just because no one had broken that 4 minute mile yet to really make it a thing. Um, and yet, even to this day, I mean, when the most recent conference I went to was in December, I still talk to some MSPs at times at tables and stuff where they sort of have that nonchalant, at least publicly or at a dinner table, like nonchalant attitude towards if not when, or how can I prepare. And so I'm curious, like, what did what specifically maybe did that incident teach you about security that you never expected to learn? And what was the most surprising lesson you got out of that
Uh,
experience?
Um, I don't know. I might give you a boring answer, because it was actually at Right of Boom
Okay.
that next February where I started to learn about frameworks and things
Mm,
like CIS controls. Like, I knew about NIST before that, but that just felt, and nothing against NIST, right?
yeah.
Uh, but that felt like, I don't know, just like unactionable, right? And so I started to meet, the more and more I talked about it, the more and more people I would meet, and the more conversations we would have, and the more things
Hmm.
I would learn. But the event itself really opened up my eyes to this notion that we were woefully unprepared to handle this. Now, I'm going to say publicly, and I am writing about it, that I think my team did an amazing job coming through this event.
Hmm.
The things that we did to pull through this were, I think, Herculean, right?
Yeah.
People will liken me to be the hero. I'm
Hmm.
just the guy who gets to tell the story,
Right.
but it's really the story of the other 30 people here that did such a beautiful job in getting
Mhm.
us through this and executing so well.
Yeah.
Who is it? I forget. I think it's Peter Drucker who says, culture eats strategy, right?
Mhm.
And we didn't have good strategy. We
Yeah.
had really good culture. But
Right.
what I'm saying is, like, in some ways, I almost feel like I had bullets whizzing past my head,
Mm.
and any one of them could have taken us out despite our culture.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that you should only focus on the culture and the mentality of how you approach cybersecurity, because you also need the strategy.
Yeah.
It's not that, if I had to pick only one, it would definitely be the culture. But
Mhm.
but it really opened up my eyes to, we've got some big holes to fill.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a journey, right?
Mm.
We're still filling some. We're still working on things.
Yeah.
What is it now? Almost 4 years later, but we're
Mhm.
way, 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 way past where we were.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, just to kind of wrap up this portion of the conversation, the evolution of it really. So now you're working with Jason and Matt
Yeah.
for with CyberRise. You've done the CompTIA emergency response team. I don't know if I should call that a different label or if it survived
Well,
the
now
transition.
it'll probably revert back to just its core name of MSP 911.
Okay, got it.
Right.
And then now you get to MC, a major security conference. Like, what is the thing? This maybe goes back to the very first question that I opened with. Like, what's the thing that keeps pushing you to drive this message forward?
Listen, uh, without getting overly sentimental here, people will often ask me, especially when we've not spoken before, especially on video,
Hmm.
like, they'll make comments about that flag behind me.
Hmm.
There's multiple reasons why it's up there, but the primary reason is my love and appreciation for what this country represents, uh, both for me personally and our nation, but also the
Hmm.
world and history. Um, I don't think you're going to find a bigger patriot than me.
Yeah.
And I feel that we're under attack, right? And it's not
Mm.
even a feeling, it's a fact. We are under attack. We have enemies at our gates that are trying to get in, um, and that are looking to destroy us simply because of the ideals that thing represents.
Hmm.
And so I felt, here I am, just this kid from Yonkers who got
Yeah.
his face bloodied one day in July 2021. How am I going to stand up to international threat actors, right?
Mm.
And what I realized at that moment in time is that I actually have an ability to fight. And that is, and it's one of the, I think, elements that influence the name Cyber Rise, is that ability to rise, be the rising tide for everybody else's boat, to be able to help
Hmm.
influence a community in any way that I can. I don't want to say that I, anyone calling themselves an influencer or a thought leader, you got to stop saying that, because you're not if you're
Hmm.
saying it. I don't feel that I am, but I know that people like to hear the story,
Hmm.
that I have some valuable things to contribute to a larger story that we
Sure.
all participate in collaboratively in the community. And this is my way of fighting back, right? This is my
Yeah.
way of saying, you know what? I actually do have some capability to push back and to fight back. And this is how I'm doing it, is by any kind of public advocacy that I could do.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think uh, one of a couple things that I'm hearing you say without you even saying it, I'm thinking of it as even through your answer is one of the things you really do bring to the industry is a level of humility and vulnerability. And then through walking through those two doors, you have the story and the experience and the conviction and the desire and the aspiration for something to be bigger and better. But
You said it better than I did.
yeah, the two those two ingredients were really the two words I wanted to drive home, because I think in our amazing society, um, those two traits rather, vulnerability and humility, especially in a intellectual industry that is then a problem solving industry, that is then also a you're supposed to always have the answers industry.
Yes.
It's in direct conflict with the amount of emotional safety or security or confidence, whatever the right thing is, I don't even know, but to be able to show up with humility or be vulnerable enough to, like, to maybe to your lie and just push through. Like, what's the job to be done? Let's go get it done.
Yep. Well,
So
I'll say that while I'll disagree with you for a second here, and I think you'll agree with me when I maybe rephrase it slightly.
Sure.
It's not that vulnerability is in direct conflict with, all of the other strengths and attributes and skills that you articulated, but that on the surface it is seen as opposition. But if
Mm,
you put on a different lens, you see that vulnerability can be a strength,
yeah.
that humility can be a strength.
Hmm.
It all depends on the application. If
Right.
I sit in the corner and cry like a wounded child, maybe that's being vulnerable,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And maybe in some ways it's humble in a lot of different ways, but there's no strength from that. But if
Sure.
I say, hey, look, you know what? This bad thing happened to me. I'm a victim.
Hmm.
My world almost collapsed on multiple levels through this ordeal.
Yeah.
And in some ways it has, because the psychological scars of that, I don't think will ever go away, at least not for
Sure.
me personally.
Yeah.
But I can lean into that and I can use that. I can be maybe even slightly defiant about it, to be able
Hmm.
to push back and say, not, I'm not just going to lay down and accept this. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
So, vulnerability can be a strength.
Yeah.
I think culturally, we talked about our nation, and, we talked about a little bit about what our industry values,
Hmm.
or what business values. I think we've got to find a way to talk, to sew in these threads of vulnerability and humility into that fabric.
Yeah. I really appreciate that reframe because you are right. It's like vulnerability, while perceived to be a weakness, is one of the highest forms of expression of strength. I
Yep.
would agree with that reframe
Yep.
for sure. Okay, let's transition. I had asked you before you came on to be thinking about some of those things that really get under your skin, whether we call them pet peeves, whether we call them hot takes, whether we call them spicy things for Dean to talk about
Yep.
on Mondays. But we all kind of have them, especially if we've been in it long enough. And there's no shortage of the ones that I have. I'm actually interested to dive into this first one because I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, I don't know, to actually don the title that we hate, or hate's too strong of a word. But let's talk
Yeah.
about VCIO for a thing, right?
Okay. Yep.
You've mentioned that
Put it
VCIO
right
is
out there. Yep.
not really a thing. Yeah. So when you hear an MSP say that they actually offer VCIO services,
Yep.
what is the first emotion that actually hits you?
Um, well, I don't know if it's an emotion. It's more of an intellectual thought. Like, I
Okay.
can't process that. I almost want to say, okay, can you show me the resumes of the people that you have,
Hmm.
put that hat on?
Yeah.
I mean, are they really VCIOs? Just because you went out and bought a tool and you subscribed to, I don't know, a program, or listened to a bunch of speakers, or signed up for some training,
Yeah.
doesn't make somebody a VCIO. What makes them a VCIO is their experience, right? Their
Hmm.
relevant consulting experience,
Yeah.
which includes a wide breadth of types of experience, both management, people
Hmm.
experience, heavy technology. This isn't something, that a junior level person that can do, or even somebody who is senior but only has certain elements of that. Um,
Yeah.
and the second part that kind of gets me is that I want to say, for the average MSP. Now, look, if you're a
Hmm.
$100 million MSP and you've got a lot of big customers, you probably have some VCIOs. So don't get me wrong, right?
Right.
But for, let's just say, a $5 million, a $4 million, a $3 million MSP,
Hmm.
I don't think you really have VCIOs.
Yeah.
You, as the owner, it might be a stretch for you to call yourself a VCIO, but you
Hmm.
don't really have VCIOs. And the next step after that is, I don't think you need a VCIO. I think what you need is
Yeah.
really good account managers, right?
Mm. Hmm.
And here I am going to show my age again, Jeff.
Yeah. Do it.
When we, when I got my first business card in 1988, I was still in college. The business card said, my name, Robert Cioffi,
Mm.
computer consultant, right? We used to call
Yeah.
ourselves computer consultants. Even when I started my business in 1993 with my business partner, right? We were
Hmm.
computer consultants. That's the category we put ourselves in. Somewhere in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, that term felt icky and we got
Mm.
rid of it because it
Yeah.
didn't really say all the other things that we did. But
Hmm.
I want to say there's value in that word consultant. And so I've kind of went through this historical path to make my point here is let's grab back onto that word consultant. If you
Mhm.
have people on your team that can provide really high level and in-depth consulting services,
Yeah.
then maybe they're closer to a VCIO um, or as to what the industry thinks it is.
Mhm.
But otherwise, you're just providing really good account management. So be that good, do
Yeah.
that. If
Yeah.
you're creating roadmaps and assessing technology against your good standards and moving people on that journey, on that path to be better with their technology to conform to standards, you're doing great account management, right?
Mhm.
You're handling their higher level needs. You're finding resources for them. You're doing account management, right? You're
Yeah.
not doing VCIO.
Yeah. Yeah, this was one of the things that really kind of took off online when I had posted my conversation with Alex Farling, because
Yeah.
he takes the same position, which I don't disagree with. And what I really want to lean into is kind of what you had said, is delivering high value account management consistently and routinely will take you so much further than reaching to be able to create this next new service offering that you feel like you need to have because some industry best practice said to, or it showed up on some spreadsheet somewhere and you just need to like fill a box. And I think the caveat, and not caveat, but the the thing that I didn't witness out of the majority of MSPs was like delivering high value account management services. That part's not hard. It's the doing it consistently part that a lot of MSPs tend to struggle with, it
Correct.
seems. And so I wonder, like, is there, what do you see as the real difference between the strategic guidance that can be offered from like the account managers, let's just call them, and that challenge that they have of what MSPs are actually able to deliver consistently?
Um, yeah, there's some nuance in this answer, I believe,
Sure.
right? And I think you've articulated it clearly that, well, I'm going to push back on one thing.
Yeah.
I don't believe that most MSPs do account management well, but then the second part that you said was where I do agree is doing it consistently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we kind of sucked at account management around the time of our attack going back 4 years ago.
Yeah.
We were actually better at it in the past when it was
Mm-hmm.
my business partner and I doing it.
Yeah.
But then we tried to delegate that out and as we were scaling our business, and we had to reformulate, right? And so now
Yeah.
I feel like we're back to where we were before, and maybe like 2 or 3 times better than we were ever before. But it took
Mm-hmm.
years of consistent investment and development time into our
Mm-hmm.
people and our processes to get it right.
Yeah.
And now, even only up until last year, we struggled a little bit with the consistency element of it. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard just to do that. Now you want to throw in like doing things strategically beyond that, doing that higher level, high value consulting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different person in my book. It's not the same person. It doesn't mean that that person can't transition into a VCIO, but a VCIO is not a strategic account manager.
Yeah.
They do different things in
Mm-hmm.
my book.
Yeah.
That VCIO is going to work. Is going to dig in on projects or help them with a line of business application implementation, or better yet, take a step back. Your line of business application isn't meeting your business requirements,
Mm.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Let me go to market with you and let's
Mm-hmm.
evaluate them, right? Let me put together, here's that
Yeah.
term again,
Right.
project plans, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do some project management.
Right.
That's not what an account manager does.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. I'm sorry. That's not
Yeah.
what they do.
Right.
But a VCIO can do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's figure out. Let's get some AI technology in here. Let's start building some small use cases in our organization to see how we can. Those would be examples of things that I think a VCIO would do.
Yeah. So let's talk to those MSPs that are out there. They've got account management. Hopefully, let's just for the sake of the argument, they have dedicated account managers doing account management. And yet they themselves would admit, or maybe not admit, but would know and wouldn't admit that they're not doing it consistently, or they're not doing it exceptionally well or up to their standard. Like,
Right.
have you seen, can you distill down like a 3-part framework or just start here to get towards what consistent excellence would look like?
Yeah.
Even just consistency first, right?
I think you have to start with, do you have standards? Everybody talks about
Mm,
having standards. Everybody talks about, and it's not the same thing as tech stack,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And wrapping some really good questions in there. So we do an annual assessment. I forget what it is, 48, 49, 50 questions. It's somewhere in that ballpark. And we've got a great tool that we put it in, and we use the tool to manage those assessments, and then use that data to form or inform a conversation that we're going to have with the business leaders of that particular client, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you got to start with, what are all the things that you need to assess? What does good look like, right? And good look like, by the way, it's not just, hey, do you have our antivirus solution? Hey, do you have our
Yeah.
backup solution? Yeah, those
Right.
things are in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the easy things to pick on. Hey, are all your machines not end of life, right? Are they all
Yeah.
5 years?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully not 5 years, but
Mm-hmm.
anywhere between 2 and 4 years old, or 1 and 4 years
Yeah.
old. Okay, great.
Right.
Gold star for that.
Mm-hmm.
Check. Servers, firewalls, switches, access points. But what about policies? What about procedures? What about
Mm-hmm.
purchasing habits? What about, there's a lot of things that we can all sit down and think of, that you would say, if my client was an excellent client, they would not only be adopting all these technologies, but they would be behaving in certain ways. And I'm going to
Mm.
assess them on that, and then use that to guide your consultative conversation with them
Yeah.
about how, what better looks like, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
um and so you gotta have a tool. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't want to necessarily promote any specific one, but there's some
Sure.
good tools out there. But you've got to be dedicated in
Mm-hmm.
applying those tools consistently, and you can't just throw in there, like, do they have an antivirus and backup
Yeah.
or not? Like,
Yeah.
that's not a good conversation. I hope
Right.
to God you're not having those conversations with your customers,
Yeah.
during your QBRs, SBRs, annuals, quarterlies, whatever.
Yeah.
Please don't, right?
Right. That was going to
Um,
be my like gut check of, am I hearing it correctly? Because this is what I would believe too. Is like, are my account managers just out there asking questions we should already know the answer to, or are they out there asking the questions that we actually seek to want to know the answer to, and the customer probably isn't thinking about those things as well, right?
yeah,
So we're leading them towards a better outcome or a better future, rather
absolutely.
than just like, yeah, we need to reconcile some stuff again because we
I,
don't have our shit straight anyway.
and to give an example, as an example, like a couple
Mm-hmm.
of years ago, we put in there, because post attack, do you have cyber liability insurance policy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's kind of like a yes no conversation, right? You have it or you don't.
Yeah.
Um, and so it wasn't just, do you have it, yes or no, and then write down the answer and go on to the next one. But it was more about like an educational conversation with them. I would sit down
Mm-hmm.
with them as, Jeff, the CEO, listen, here's what a policy is. Here's what it provides. Here's what it doesn't provide. Here's why you probably want to have something like this.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, our agreement doesn't cover recovery costs if you get popped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a business conversation around risk. And
Yeah.
now that we've rinsed and repeated on that for the last couple of years, a lot of our customers have policies now. I'd like to say that I've become an insurance policy salesman in some kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
because I've encouraged them to get these policies. And honestly, for the ones that do not have a policy, they've heard me, like the doctor, right? When you go in
Yeah.
for your physical, they've heard me say it enough times, like, Jeff, stop smoking. Jeff, lose
Mm-hmm.
20 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they already anticipate. I know we don't have a policy. We know we
Mm-hmm.
should have one. We're going to try to budget for that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's now you're talking high value. Now you're providing them information. You're not beating them up over the head, but you're
Mm-hmm.
providing them good, valuable conversation around business risk, and achieving their goals and overcoming their challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Um, you used the other three-letter C word, so I'm going to pivot to that part of
Uh-oh.
the conversation. In this fictitious, geez, example where I'm the CEO,
Yeah.
this idea that we really need to stop with that level of inflation, right? Those kinds of titles.
Yeah.
What finally made you? What finally made it a hot button issue for you? It's the right way to answer that.
I don't know. I think it was just time.
Mm,
When I was a kid, if someone said to me, like, I can remember, like, an older aunt or uncle saying, "Oh, look at
Mhm.
Robert. He's so smart. Like, one day he's going to be a CEO," right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's like a big deal. Now everybody's a CEO.
Mm.
I go to like local business networking groups and I see, somebody gives me their card and they're a CEO of their company. And
Yeah.
then through conversation, what I really discover is they're a solopreneur, right? They're a one
Right.
man band or a one woman band, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. Zero wrong with that. I don't know. It feels weird to take
Mhm.
on that title of CEO.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Maybe I'll catch a lot of heat for this, and I'm okay with that because it's my opinion. And if you don't
Yeah.
like it, then push back on me.
Sure.
Um, and nobody's dying over this either. So,
Right.
like, I almost feel like there should be a line like you're not allowed to use any C-level titles unless your company is like at
Yeah.
least 100 employees. That's the line I kind of drew. Once you
Right.
hit 100 employees, now you can start being a CEO.
Yeah.
Or in my case, which is what I started with, I'm the CTO. I'm the chief technology officer here.
Mhm.
I'm probably like more like a VP of technology here than a CTO. CTO means something different,
Sure.
right? I think
Yeah.
these titles should be reserved more for mid-sized to enterprise type companies.
Yeah.
Um, I think titles are important. They communicate a lot about who you are and what you do.
Mhm.
And if I was a solopreneur, I certainly wouldn't call myself CEO. I just would not.
Yeah.
Um, so
Have you seen an example of where somebody's inflated title actually damages their business or the business relationship?
I find myself sometimes in odd situations where I'm in a room full of CEOs and it just doesn't feel like anybody actually earned that title.
Mm, yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's elitist or pretentious of me to feel. And just full disclosure, I too do not feel like I have earned the right for that title, despite all of my experience and
Yeah.
my history. I just don't think it belongs
Yeah.
there. And listen, I'm not dying on this hill. It's
Sure.
just more of an observation where over the years I'm like, it's kind of funny. Like, we throw around these chief titles like they're like they're nickels. Like,
Right.
it's just like like it toss that frisbee, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you want to you get it. It's like Oprah, you get a chief title, you get a
Yeah.
chief title, you get a chief title. It's like, I don't know. It just feels wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree through that lens. At least I shouldn't say, well, one, I do agree, but two, I have like that same sort of tightening of my chest, just like discomfort to certain strata of titles, right? Um, i- and I think it's probably more like, I don't know what the litmus test would be, but maybe if I was sitting in that same room that you're kind of describing, I think about that old, I don't know if it's an adage, a quote, or a paraphrase, but where it's like you're better off keeping your mouth shut and having everyone else think you're stupid rather than opening your mouth and proving them right. Is
Right?
like
Yeah,
that's kind
exactly.
of like the measurement
Yeah,
of the barometer of that like title check.
yeah,
Because it isn't really about the title anyway. It's about either the job to be done or the experience that you have or the guidance you can provide. I kind of sometimes think about it as like I always try to surround myself with people that like they need to be reaching backwards towards me because they're way farther down that journey and like can pull me forward because I want
yeah,
to grow, I want to expand, I want to learn, I want to do all those things. um I also like helping people, so like I'm willing to turn around with my own arms and help other people if they see that I'm further than where they are. But I can see where titles today, especially with the how easy it is to be one on LinkedIn, really, uh, or any
yeah. You
social
don't even need
platform,
to
right? Like,
print a business card
yeah,
anymore, right?
exactly.
I just go to
Yeah,
my profile and update it.
right. It's like the digital emperor wears no clothes kind of situation,
Yeah,
potentially, right?
I like that. Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
awesome.
Um,
All
Anyway,
right.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at the job descriptions of these C levels, like, and then you think about what we do, and again, this I think transcends MSPs because
Hmm.
I see this with my clients as well.
Yeah.
And like I said, solopreneurs that I run into.
Hmm.
Look at the real job description of what a CEO does, and uh, I would say 90% of the listening audience that has that title, there's probably a lot of things that you do that um, also that you also do that
Yeah.
a CEO of a big company would never be caught dead doing. Like, look, I'll freely admit, an hour before this conversation, I was downstairs preparing a shipment, to be shipped out to a conference
Right.
that I'm helping somebody with, right?
Yeah.
Would a CTO ever be caught with a roll of packing tape and printing and going to UPS and putting in box
Yeah.
weights and demand? Like, I did
Right.
it because like nobody else was here to
Yeah.
do it, and I did it. And
hmm
even if they were, I don't know, I'll go do it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think this is a great transition into one of the other topics I want to cover with you, because there's an element here, you may not label it this way, but what I'm picking up on is little nuggets of what the culture inside your business must be like.
Hmm.
And you mentioned earlier to culture eating strategy. And so one of the things that I know to be true about this, because you'd mentioned this to me earlier as well, is that you'd sort of stepped back from an element of the leadership uh,
Yep.
function in order to fix your own account management team.
Yeah.
Fix may not be the right word, right? But to step in there and build it out so that it was actually documented in process, procedure, all that good stuff.
Yes.
First, like, walk me through that decision, maybe the awareness to then the decision to truly like take that step back and lean in.
Yeah. So post attack, we lost some accounts that I think were. It wasn't just because of the attack.
Right.
That was that really broke some accounts. There were a
Mm-hmm.
few accounts that we had where I don't feel we were managing them well. Right? There's a line, I don't know who said it, but I got it from somebody that said, "You lose small accounts on service, you lose big accounts on account management."
Mm.
Um, but it was sort of like a slow death happening. And then, the day of that event,
Yeah.
and, even though we were able to recover everybody in about 2.5 weeks with a strong focus on the bigger accounts first, uh, we were punished for that, right?
Yeah.
We lost some big accounts. I think if we had stronger account management prior to that event, that we would have had less of a loss of
Mm.
business, fewer accounts, and especially the bigger ones that left us, because those are the ones, we lost probably a good 4 or 5 pretty large accounts because of this. They probably wouldn't have walked had
Mm.
we had account management right. So that was like, observation number 75 of the many things that I
Yeah.
observed of this, but it was like an important one, right? Like I went,
Mm-hmm.
wow, like this really highlights why we've got to get way better at this.
Yeah.
And I talked to my business partner about me like making some change with personnel and, the amount of time I was going to need. And he pretty much convinced me, like, Robert, like, I know that you think you're superhuman, and maybe there are days where you can actually function like that. But
Mm-hmm.
to do this long term, like, I don't see how you're going to be the integrator, for those of you EOS followers, the integrator of our company and do this at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I mulled that over a little bit. We talked about it back and forth, and we made what I think was dare I say this word again, vulnerable,
Sure.
this vulnerable and humble decision that I'm going to resign from the executive leadership team. I'm going to give up this integrator hat. I'm going to trust that the other people on my executive leadership team can run this business without me while I go fix this, this
Mm-hmm.
half of the house that's on fire. Maybe
Yeah.
not half, but
Sure.
the significant and important part of the house, which is, just not right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now I'm really happy to say that, and one of the ways that I envisioned this was, and I said it to my business partner at the time, I'm like, we suck at this right now,
Yeah.
and that's okay, but
Mm-hmm.
damn it, I'm gonna fix this. And this is not an ask, and I don't submit talks for, even though I probably could, but I don't feel like I'm the right person to necessarily talk about account management excellence.
Mm-hmm.
But I basically said, I want to be sought after in the industry to come to conferences to talk about how to do account management right. Like, that's my litmus. Like, it
Yeah.
was sort of a fantasy, like more
Yeah.
of just like, I just want to
Yeah.
feel that I
The
could.
aspirational identity that
Yeah,
says like I made it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for, I'm not looking for it. And I certainly have plenty of opportunity to submit talks, and I don't on
Mm-hmm.
that topic, at least. And I feel like we're there. I feel like we're pretty damn close, at least, even
Yeah.
though I still kind of gave us a B. I'm very hard on very much a perfectionist.
Hmm.
And now what we're operating on is this notion of scalability, right?
Right.
So I have somebody else helping me. We're looking for an assistant to augment what we're doing.
Hmm.
And we've got four acquisitions of varying size in our pipeline. Even
Yeah.
if one of them hits, we're going to be busy with, I'll say, much more account management.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah. So two questions there. Going back just a little bit, how
sure.
painful was it to truly let go when you brought Jeff in as your COO?
So Jeff came on as our COO actually only this April. So
Okay.
we operated for a period of time of almost 3 years where we did not have, my business partner took on or assumed the role of integrator,
Got it.
right?
Okay.
And
Yep.
he's running our sales and business development and
Yeah.
some other things, and now suddenly he's got his hands full, and we just came through a pretty bad event and we
Hmm.
wanted to be super careful with our money.
Right.
So we weren't going out to hire that position, but,
Hmm.
and it took us a while to find the right person. We did, thankfully.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was scary. I mean, it's not that I didn't trust the team and my partner
Hmm.
to move the company forward without me, at least at that level.
Right.
But I just knew that me not doing this was a far worse decision, as much as I'm
Sure.
a control freak
Yeah.
and a perfectionist. And he
Yeah.
and I, established what we call a same page meeting where we, if there's anything big, he's going to talk to me about it. But, smaller, mid-sized decisions, I don't need to be involved in it.
Right.
I just don't.
Yeah.
But I do, by the way, participate in our annual strategic meetings
Okay.
because, listen, I've got 32 years experience here. I'm one of the two co-founders. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not like I don't have a head full of good ideas and
Yeah.
experience to share. So,
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. So
so there's
then,
other ways to do that, is my point, right?
right. Yeah. And even though you're willing to ride your bike without your hands on the handlebars, you still got to turn the corner every once in a while and put
You
your
do.
hands on,
You do.
right?
And you know
Yeah.
what? Honestly, for MSPs who are like kind of like maybe sort of semi in this mindset, what we also realized was, what a wonderful way to set us up for a future transition, because there's
Yeah.
one day I will not be in this business. Either they're going to like pick me up off my desk because I died of old age, or some other event is going to happen where I'm not here. So
Yeah.
what a wonderful way of preparing for that day, right? It was sort
Hmm.
of like a test,
Yeah.
right? Because
Right.
honestly, what I'm doing now for the business, the bulk of what I'm doing in terms of strategic account management
Hmm.
and running our cybersecurity,
Right.
which is kind of where the CTO hat comes in,
Hmm.
is, there's that word again, CTO.
Yeah.
It is, those are two roles that I could hire for. I
Hmm.
don't need to do them. I'm
Yeah.
just choosing to do them now so that I can set the company up for a successful transition to the next set of hands, right? But
Yeah.
I'm lifting up my right hand in account management right now to take on as much, and he's responding. I got the right person with the right
Hmm.
skills, and we just need to put in some more
Yeah.
time. There, we're going to get there. Now we're looking at the next person. Who do we bring up behind him?
Yeah. What I love about that last point that just sort of almost came out organically is it's another area where I see, other businesses, other industries may have this problem too. I don't know. I only know MSP professionally, but where the way in which we go about solving problems, specifically as it relates to like building team, building process, and everything else, oftentimes I see more of a protocol of hiring a person so that I can abdicate the responsibility of doing the thing.
Yeah.
But the way you just described the way in which you're doing it is a drastically different approach where it's like find the right person, take the time, build the process, raise them up. One of the MSPs, my second one that I was at, had a core value of putting yourself, the company, and your client in a position to win. That's kind of the way that I think about that, right? Like it's solving through the problems so far that, the people that'll grab that torch from you and continue on owning that area of the business
I think there's
are in a
some roles
position.
that you can't hire for very easily. In my
Yeah.
book, you can't just go out there and find an account manager to start taking over the management of, like, especially major accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, there's time there, even if they were fully skilled, right?
Yep.
And came from another MSP where they were
Hmm.
doing this for years, they
Yeah.
still don't have the, I'll say, that institutional knowledge. But the most important thing that
Hmm.
they lack is the relationship connection with
Yeah.
all of those accounts. Now, you can overcome that, but that requires
Sure.
time.
Yeah, that's so huge. Another way that another area of the business I see that come up is typically on from a sales perspective. One of the more common, I don't know if there's best practices out there that are doing it or if it's just the way processes seem to be unfolding, is like there are these different individuals running different parts of the sales motion, and unintentionally and inadvertently you're destroying the trust that gets built through every like stage gate, because maybe you don't want to do the cold calling, but then you only don't want to do the first time appointments and you'll take the closing method. And it's like, well, all of the currency that you built up, all of the goodwill that you built in the earlier stages get sucked out the vacuum every time
Yeah.
you change hands. And I look at that very similarly how you're talking about account management. There's so much relationship equity that is built that you need to have that overlap period so that you have enough touch points with the client, even with both of you, even if it's costing you both resources. Like, you have to smooth that out, because even if you do that part perfectly, it's never a one-to-one replacement of relationship equity. It's just
Yep,
like
you
holding on
said
to
that
it.
really well.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we experienced. Was I knew that when, we hired a gentleman about a year and a half ago,
Hmm.
um, and it was just, even though he's like really great with people, he's such a people person, right? And he's smart, and he has all the other skills as well. Um, but it still is taking, it's only now where I
Yeah.
think people really trust him,
Hmm.
because he's been around now for a
Yeah.
while, right?
Right. Yep.
And we've been together on calls,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And or in-person meetings.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
just takes time. It wasn't going to happen with one email or one introduction or one
Right.
call or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just not.
Yeah. And maybe it just came to me through that lens as well. One of Robert Cialdini's principles of influence is consistency. And so if you're thinking about change or looking at change like that in your business, and we're so in an RMM world and in a post-COVID world where like everything can really be done remotely or digitally or without ever interacting with a person, we sort of cling into that trap too of like, well, I could just hand this off to this replacement and I'll send an email to introduce them or whatever. It's like, well, what if you took a little bit extra time to hack consistency as an influence metric, and you engineered 4 touch points with that really important client where both of you were present and it
Yeah.
was a free flow, and you actually didn't lead the meeting, you let that person lead the meeting, and but you were there for the safety blanket, and as they led it, they're going to be observing like, oh wow, he or she held their own just as
Yeah.
well as Robert would have. And
You just described exactly the plan that I put out. I mean, I can't say that we executed perfectly on
sure.
it or consistently on it, but we did it consistently
Hmm.
enough, and with enough thoroughness
Yeah.
that we've arrived there, right? Only,
Hmm.
actually, we hit one of those inflection points at the beginning of the year where I said, or it was actually at the end of the year in preparation for January 1st, to
Hmm.
say, okay, we're going to shift some lines around. Like, here's some accounts that you don't need me for,
Yeah.
right? I still get invited to things, and I'm like, you guys don't need me, do you?
Yeah.
They're like, no. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, I feel real special. Thanks, guys. Right.
Yeah.
And like, so
Yeah.
I'm playing the wounded parent. Right.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. One of those
um,
questions we use internally a lot for that too,
but
as
I
it's
walk away so happy, like they've
yeah.
got, I know, and it's the confidence that I have. I know that they're doing a
Hmm.
great job. Now, some of these bigger accounts, the ones that are a little bit more spidery or,
Yeah.
whatever, like, yeah, I'm still going to be involved in that. But in those cases, like, I bring everybody along for the ride because I want
Hmm.
them to observe and to learn.
Yeah. One of the things that I watched happen at two different MSPs as the transition out of like owner led everything, everything's broad, but like, you know what I mean? There were several things owner was still involved in, or like they were the point of entry for,
Mm,
was like one of the most empowering things to you, Mr. or Mrs. MSP owner, that you can do for your team when you still get those calls, but you're in that transitionary period as well, is don't own it on your own. Instead, thank you, Robert, for calling me. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to hand this to Jeff. Jeff will get in touch with you and handle this with the team moving
correct.
forward.
Yep.
Right. Like, and that's such a hard thing, it seems, to do. And yet it's the fastest way to accomplish the result we're talking about here as well, is put your team in a position to be seen as trusted and trusting and consistent and
You know,
can deliver.
Jeff, it's almost like because, and I'm saying this, I guess, on a personal level, because about a month ago I got on the scale and I didn't like what I saw. So
Yeah.
I've been on this big health kick lately and tracking progress and goals.
Hmm.
I think all of us who've started a new either eating or exercise regimen, it's hard at first, but then like it starts to feed into itself, right? You feel
Yeah.
more energized. You get on the scale and you see a number you hadn't seen in a while, and you
Yeah.
go, oh, this like you're like it influences like
Hmm.
decisions now throughout the day in a positive way, right?
Right.
It's the same thing, right?
Hmm.
You're scared to death to put some stranger
Yeah.
in front of your customer to handle maybe a
Right.
little bit of a sticky issue.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes so liberating when they actually execute
Hmm.
pretty well. And you get
Yeah.
like, hey, who's this guy? Like, he's pretty good. I like him. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to come anymore, Robert. Thank
yeah,
you, though. Yeah.
well, yeah, I'm still
Yeah.
going to stick my
Right.
nose in
I'll
things.
go where I want. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the question, or one of the phrases we use internally on sort of that, like, can I do this on my own, or do we need to have more than one person? It's like, does the scene need me? Is our
Mm,
challenge question
yeah.
internally to each other is, do we both need to go to this thing? I don't know, does the scene need me? And you're in control of the scene in this case. So like, you let me know. If so, I'll be there 100%. But if not, then I got it. You go it, and you'll go own it there.
Or how expensive is this meeting? There's
Yeah.
5 people
Right.
on this call and there's one
Yeah.
of them.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Geez. Do the
Um,
math.
yeah. One thought that the not last question, but a question I didn't ask, as you had mentioned earlier, as you guys are looking at growth and some potential acquisitions and those kinds of things, is there, what's the right way to ask the question? How are you preparing through the lens of culture for that kind of growth?
That's a great question, because we recognize that, and if we're going to execute on an acquisition, we're not only acquiring a customer list,
Hmm.
you know, that's pretty much the plain,
Yeah.
to boil it down, right? That's what you're really acquiring, a customer list, and you're inheriting contracts and things like that. But equal to that, I think, is you're also inheriting or absorbing or assimilating in a team.
Hmm.
And both of those need to be onboarded. Every one of those clients needs to be onboarded into your methodologies and culture and way of doing things, as well
Hmm.
as those team members.
Yeah.
So, um, both present a challenge, if you
Hmm.
would, right? I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
a problem. I'm just saying there's this challenge of setting expectations correctly, having
Hmm.
the open dialogue and communication, because you just don't, like there's one company, for instance, I think it's 9 people that we would be absorbing. What if those 9 people are all jerks? I'm
Yeah.
not saying they are,
Right.
and my expectation is that none of them are jerks.
Hmm.
What if they were, right?
Yeah.
What and
Yeah.
that's the mentality you have to kind of go into it with, is to make sure that you've um, that you're assimilating them properly. And in fact, actually, I was talking to my COO Jeff last night or the night before, I can't remember, but we were talking about, hey, isn't it great that we feel so confident about our culture that it's going to be an advantage, because
Mm.
we feel like for the targets that we're looking at, not that they're bad companies or badly led, but we're just a step or two ahead of them in
Yeah.
terms of culture, and we should be attractive for those employees
Yeah.
and attractive for those clients that will
Mm.
look at us and go, wow, we were happy, but geez, look at all this extra value, right?
Right. Yeah. One of those things that I usually do it when I'm coaching to the sales side of helping the other person understand what to expect. The example I normally give is what's in the box. And not like an SNL skit, but like when I was a kid and I was in Boy Scouts and we had the Halloween party. Think back that long. You had Halloween party, you had like stations you'd go to, right? There was this one station, which was, it was all fear, as high as it could get. Why? Because it was just a black box, wrapped or whatever, sitting on a table with a black tablecloth with a little slot that you put your hand in, but you had no clue what was on inside the box, right? So like
Giant spiders,
all the
poisonous.
fear,
Yeah,
exactly, because like
yeah.
on the outside there was a
Snakes.
pine cone, snake, yeah, it was
Yeah.
anything and everything. Then what happens? You put your hand in, and it's like a bowl full of wet spaghetti noodles or Jello or something, right? So like all that fear, all that anxiety, all that stress, all that pressure was imaginary and not real to begin with. But the only way, so now you flip the table. Okay, if I'm dealing with the incumbent, or incumbent might not be the right word, the organization that you would be acquiree, and you think through the lens of like, well, what's in the box, right? So what is it about Progressive that they need to understand or feel or see,
Yeah.
so that there's less anxiety, stress, pressure about really just the communication, the transparency, the what to expect. Like,
Yeah.
this is the black box. Here's the process of putting our hand inside the hole of the black box. Here's a flashlight. You can go look inside that little hole first, so you know exactly what you're putting your
Yeah.
hand into. And it's just such a powerful illustration for me when I think about scenarios like that, where there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of humanity, and you don't know how to go and talk to or hit all of those, levels or layers. I like to use that example specifically more in the sales side than anything now, but I could see where that might apply in, the merging of people or systems or
For the
teams.
record, I would have been way more cruel than putting wet spaghetti
Yeah.
inside that black box. I would have come up with some more creative things, at least a mousetrap. Come on.
Yeah.
An
Yeah.
armed mousetrap.
Right, an armed mousetrap. Yeah, with maybe like a little couple of grooves out of the spring to make sure it wouldn't break bones. But
Yep.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, Robert, man, this conversation has been just awesome. I appreciate your willingness to come on and to be so candid and forthcoming, but also just like laying it all out there from an
Yeah.
experience standpoint. I think it's such a gift to the industry to be able
Well, I
to
appreciate your
listen.
intuitive questions and the invitation to just, come up here and, to come here and talk. I
Yeah,
feel like I got a lot to say, but I've also learned so much from so many others out there.
hmm,
So, half of what I'm saying is probably just an echo of things that were taught to
sure.
me by others.
Yeah, it
But
feels.
I love this community, and any way that I can give back to it is an opportunity for me to, feel like I went to bed that night, knowing that I did some good.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. What I was going to say through that lens is like one of the things I'm most grateful for out of the 18, 19 years I've spent in the space is that it was a hard lesson for me to learn, but once one of my COOs was nice enough to teach it to me, is like, have a willingness to just ask for help, right?
Yep.
And if you do, 9.5 times out of 10 in this industry specifically, the person you ask will say yes. It may be not right now, but I will, but it's still going to be a yes. And
Yeah.
just like you coming onto the show here for the audience, it's just I've been consistently shocked, surprised, grateful. I don't know the right word necessarily for just how willing everyone in it is in this space to pull up the chair, come shoulder to shoulder instead of spear to spear, and sit down and really figure out how can I help. So again, thank you for that. I would like to give you the opportunity, if people have heard what you've had to say, are interested in a handful of the things that we've talked about you being
Sure.
involved in, like, where's the best place for people to reach out to you and get in touch?
Yeah, the easiest thing is LinkedIn. I'm kind of a junkie. I go through spurts of posting and not posting. I got a head full of ideas right now, things I want to post. I just haven't had the bandwidth to put stuff together. But
Yeah.
whether I'm posting out there or not, I'm always on it. So LinkedIn, you just look for me, Robert Cioffi, RobertCioffi. I'm kind of hard to miss. It's linkedin.com/in/R Cioffi. So that's the easiest thing. You can find me on my website, progressivecomputing.com. Also, a pretty easy place to find me. Robert C at progressivecomputing.com if you want to drop me an email.
Yeah.
Or if you're at some of the major conferences, I'll be at Right of Boom in the event that this hits before that. If not, if it hits after that, that's fine too. You'll see me at other IT Nation events, and yeah, I'm usually at a good dozen conferences a year. But
Yeah.
just drop me a line. I'd be happy to connect and talk more about really anything. I really try to live that go-giver life.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You get one more opportunity to go give and maybe leave a question to
Yeah.
jar somebody on the next one. So if you could leave one question behind that the
Hmm.
next guest has to answer, what
Right.
would your question be, Robert?
Um, there's actually so many of them that I have. I was going to do something maybe And by the way, this you're putting me totally on the spot
Yeah,
because I
no one
didn't
gets
think
prepped for
about
this.
this
Yeah,
until you mentioned it an hour ago at the beginning of this conversation.
yeah,
So I was thinking about something about more like around personal finances, right?
mm,
Like, because I think many of us don't put enough time into making sure that our money outlives us.
yeah,
But related to that, my question is going to be around legacy.
mm,
So, and this might be more directed towards MSP owners, but it could be an owner of really any company. And certainly it could even be someone who's employed within a company. Mainly for owners, though, is
yeah,
what are you going to do after you're out of your business? Have you really thought about what are the next stages of life for you? Have you crafted that? And if so, could you confidently and clearly um, explain what that is right now? The reason behind this question, Jeff, is because I see a lot of, especially MSPs, a lot of old timers like me that have been in the business for decades, and
hmm,
they're thinking they're going to sell one day. And there's this feeling of regret that
yeah,
now suddenly their life went upside down. You hear about this phenomenon with retirees that, and I'm going to be provocative here for a second, that will soon die after they've stopped working because
hmm,
they lose their sense of purpose.
yeah,
So have you defined what your purpose is? Do you know what you're
mm,
going to do next?
yeah. That's awesome. Great question. Again, Robert, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, audience, for tuning in to another episode of MSP Insider.